Welcome to a daily word. Do you know what this means? It means I'm watching you. It could be an encouraging thing, or it could be a threatening thing if the wrong person did that to us. That little bit of sign language. But it's also a promise from God. I'm watching you. We find it in 2 Chronicles chapter 16 and verse 9, where God says to King Asa, king of Judah, "For the eyes of the Lord move to and fro throughout the earth, that he may strongly support those whose hearts are fully his." To understand that promise fully, we need to understand the context of the statement, the history and the religious setting in which it occurred. Asa was the third king to follow wise King Solomon. It was Solomon who reigned as king. His kingdom was divided, and his son Rehoboam became king after him over the southern tribes of Judah. He was followed by Abijah, a good king, who had a fairly brief reign, and then he was followed by Asa, who had a very long reign. We read in chapter 14 of 2 Chronicles, right after we're told that Asa became king after Abijah, that he did good and right in the sight of the Lord his God. Why is that statement made early in his reign in the account of his history? Well, it's because Asa was a king whose heart was set on following God. Much like Solomon early in his reign, Asa experienced peace and prosperity for the first 3.5 decades of his reign. It was a very long reign. For 3.5 decades, he experienced peace and prosperity because he faithfully walked with God. He removed idol worship from the land. He went out in the hill country and took down the idols and the altars that people had established to worship pagan deities. He removed idols from the cities of Judah and faithfully did what God commanded him to do. He encouraged worship of God in the temple and restored that worship process for the people of Judah. But only a few verses later, in verse 11 of chapter 14, very early in the account of his life, we read that Asa faced a monumental challenge. The kings of Libya and Egypt came against him with over 1 million men and hundreds of chariots, a force that there's no way Asa could defeat and conquer. But they were coming against him to conquer him. And he turned to the Lord his God and sought God's help. And he said essentially, God, we're doomed if you don't intervene and help. We trust upon you to protect us and preserve us. And we're told that God routed the Egyptian armies and defeated them as Judah went into battle. And so because Asa called on the Lord and did what was right in God's sight, he had victory. He had peace in the land for a long time. He established strong fortified cities during those following years, until we come to chapter 16 and verse 1. We're told that in the 36th year of his reign, Asa faced another big military challenge, but this time from a neighbor, from his kinsman. King Baasha, king of the Northern Confederation of Israel, began to marshal troops to come against him and to conquer the southern tribes. Asa did something rather uncharacteristic. Instead of seeking God and turning to God for help, he took some items of gold and silver out of the temple, sent them to the king of Syria, Ben-Hadad, and asked him to form an alliance, a treaty, against Baasha and break his treaty that he already had with Baasha. Well, Ben-Hadad agreed, and he conquered Baasha, and Asa got what he wanted, sort of, but not really. He got Baasha stopped, so he didn't have to deal with that prospect of battle. But God spoke then to Asa through the prophet Hanani. And when we come to verse 9 of 2 Chronicles 16, we find that statement. For the eyes of the Lord move to and fro throughout the earth, that he may strongly support those whose hearts are fully his. In this, Hanani continued, you have acted foolishly. In making this treaty with Ben-Hadad, you've acted foolishly. You have sought his help instead of the help of the Lord your God. As a consequence, you will have wars the rest of your days. That's exactly what happened for Asa. Baasha was stopped, but he had conflict the rest of his days. And just a few verses later, we read that in the 39th year of his reign, just 3 years after this situation with Ben-Hadad, Asa became ill and he died. Very sad end to a otherwise glorious career as king over Judah. It also reminds us that when things are going well, especially for 36 years of going well, it's time to be very careful that we continue to walk faithfully with God. The eyes of the Lord move to and fro throughout the earth, that he may strongly support those whose hearts are fully his. God says, I'm watching you, and I hope you will watch me and follow me faithfully and carefully. Thank you for joining us for a daily word.